Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rocha Revolution. I have my good buddy Randy Villegas here from California 22. We're going to get started here in more depth. We have a few more people, a few more minutes to get on board. We normally build these huge audiences, more audiences than the app can carry as we get through this thing. But I'm really excited to do this Substack today with my brother from another mother, Randy, out in California. We're both farm boys from rural communities, and he is running for Congress. So we are super excited to have him here. Randy, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Chuck.
Awesome sauce. We'll go ahead and get started. Folks will come on in. They'll see this recording as we go. I met Randy over the last couple years because of the work that we've done in California 22. And when we talk about California 22, I think it's really important, and I'm going to get Randy to give a better explanation. But I've been there. My business partner was raised there, raised there. And it's a rural farming community in the Central Valley of California. A few things that always stood out to me about California 22. A is they've always elected, not always, but most of the time elected this Republican named named David Valadao. And
We'll be electing Randy.
that's right. We'll be electing Randy. But Valadao's always kind of snuck by the skin of his teeth, always overperformed. And I've always thought, Randy, that he got elected because there's a small percentage of Latinos who think he's Latino. And he tries to act one way, but he votes another way. And this is one of the most rural districts in California, and it is the most non-college educated district in California. So lots and lots of farm workers and workers. But Randy, welcome aboard here of the Rocha Revolution. Let's start by you telling us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into you telling us more about the district.
Of course. Well, thanks so much for having me, Chuck. Really thank you, everyone who's joining us today on your Substack and on the Rocha Revolution. A little bit about myself. My name is Randy Villegas. I am the son of immigrants from Mexico. My dad from Michoacan, my mom from Guerrero, and I grew up here in Bakersfield, class family. And like many immigrant families, I grew up working as many jobs as I could to help my family make ends meet. I grew up working at the swap meet every single weekend, every Sunday, getting up at 6 a.m. to go work, while my friends got to sleep in and go to the movies. And then I grew up working at my family's auto repair shop and working lots of other jobs kind of on the way. And then was the first in my family to go to college and university at Bakersfield College, CSUB. And thankfully, by the grace of God, I ended up getting a full ride scholarship to UC Santa Cruz to get my PhD. But even then, I knew my heart was always back here in the Central Valley, in the region that had given my family and I so many opportunities to be successful, to thrive. And so for the last 5 years, I've been a professor of political science at our local community college in the district, College of the Sequoias. And then I'm also a school board trustee for the Visalia Unified School District, a K through 12 district, serves roughly 30,000 students, 3,000 staff. So I've been fighting for students and working families my whole life, and I'm ready to continue this fight in Congress because the very same programs that allowed me to get to where I am today, programs like Medicaid, like free school lunches, like WIC, are all being cut under this administration. And we have a spineless coward representing us who won't stand up to this president, to his own party, and to the corruption that exists in DC.
Tell people where the Central Valley sits in California. We have a national audience.
Yes, it is a southern Central Valley. So Kern, Tulare, and Kings County. And if redistricting also goes through, it'll include parts of West Fresno County as well. And these are, the biggest cities include Bakersfield, Tulare, but we also have lots of small, rural, unincorporated communities that often are underserved, that go unacknowledged, by leaders at both the state and national level. If you've ever seen the movie McFarland USA with the cross-country runners, that is here in the district. We have people who work up, who get up every morning and work tirelessly to go feed the rest of the world while they struggle to feed their own families. And especially with, immigration raids and everything else going on across the country, we need fighters in Congress who are going to stand up at every single turn and support a new vision for the Democratic Party.
Santa Cruz. Are they the banana slugs?
They are the banana slugs.
That's, for those of you who don't know, that's the mascot at the college he was mentioning. I remember that because I'm an avid NCAA basketball March Madness follower, Randy.
Love it.
So you're running for Congress. This seat is held by David Valadao. If the current redistricting maps go through that are on the elections for November, will the district become more Republican or more Democrat?
It will become more democratic. I think we're looking at roughly 8,000 Democratic registered voters who would be added into the district. And so it'd be even more flippable than it already is. And I mean, on paper, if you ask any political pundit, if you ask any, political scientist, you just show them the numbers on paper, say Democratic majority advantage in the seats, 76% Latino majority seat. This should have been in Democratic hands a decade ago, right? And so even without redistricting, it is one of the top flip opportunities across the entire country.
Yes, and my firm has worked in this race through several cycles with lots of outside PAC work doing this. This is one of the most Latino districts in America that is represented by a Republican.
Mhm.
Also, Randy, I'd like to ask you about what your opinion is of why this phenomenon happens. It's made a lot of consultants in DC pull their hair out. And what I'm going to say is this district overwhelmingly voted for Hillary Clinton. This district overwhelmingly voted for Joe Biden, while at the same time returning a Republican congressman named David Valadao to Congress, where sometimes you saw the difference between the performance on the presidential election and the congressional election be anywhere from 5 to 15 points. Why do you think that that happens?
Yeah, because we know even though the numbers are there on paper in terms of a Democratic majority and a Latino majority, voter propensity in this district is much lower. Voter turnout in this
Explain,
district.
Randy, what voter propensity is to the average Joe. Talking about folks don't show up to vote?
Folks who don't show up to vote and who don't show up to vote consistently, who maybe only vote in general elections and don't vote in special elections or primary elections or midterm elections. And so we know that even though the numbers are there on paper, the actual electorate skews, a lot heavily older, typically more Republican, more conservative. And so this is one thing that our campaign is focused on, right? We know that we can't just talk to the same voters. We can't just talk to the same people. We will talk to them. We know that we need to share our message with everyone, but we need to work to expand the electorate. This district is also overwhelmingly young. The average age of this district is just 30 years old, which is my age right now. And we need to actually speak to the issues that are affecting young families, that are affecting young people in this district, if we expect them to turn out to vote in these elections and if we expect them to turn out consistently. And that is what our campaign is focused on, a relentless focus on affordability, a relentless focus on calling out the corruption that exists in both political parties, to be quite frank with you, where Valadao is more interested in serving his billionaire donors and special buddies and his corporate sponsors than he is in actually serving working class communities in this district. I mean, a perfect example of that is his vote on this latest big bullshit budget. And can I cuss on this? I don't
Sure, absolutely. This is Chuck Rocha
know.
podcast. You can say
Okay,
fuck.
perfect. Yeah. Well, this big bullshit budget that he voted to pass, it's going to cut $880 billion from Medicaid. It's going to cut programs like SNAP and WIC across the district in a district where 2 out of every 3 constituents relies on Medicaid. And he had signed on to several letters saying that, he wasn't going to vote for the final budget if it included cuts to Medicaid. And he fucking lied. He lied straight to our faces. And he doesn't have the balls to look people in this community and explain his vote. He hasn't had a public town hall in over 10 years. We've done several meet and greets and town halls across this community, and people are frustrated about these cuts that are coming down. Frustrated that he voted for a budget that's going to increase and triple ICE's budget. It's ridiculous. He's a complete sellout to our communities, and we deserve better here in the Central Valley.
We're going to do this several times throughout this Substack, but let people know where folks can go who want to support your campaign, give you $5, give you $500. What's the website?
Absolutely. You can head to randy.vote/donate, or you can head to villegasforcongress.com, but we have randy.vote/donate. There's also randy.vote/volunteer. Would greatly appreciate your support. We are the only campaign in this race that is not accepting any corporate PAC money whatsoever. And, I tell that story and bring it back home because my mother used to always tell me, dime con quien andas y te diré quién eres, which translated to English means tell me who you're with and I'll tell you who you are. And I think the exact same thing can be said about politics. Tell me who you're taking money from, and I can tell you who you're actually working for. I'm going to give you a couple corporate PACs here, Chuck, and I want you to tell me, do you think they gave to my Republican opponent or my Democratic opponent in this race? Chevron,
Chevron would be the oil company, and I assume the oil company would give to the Republican.
ExxonMobil,
ExxonMobil, another big oil company. Again, my vote is going to go to the Republican.
United Health.
United Health, that's where the CEO got shot in New York, who's one of
United,
the biggest healthcare providers in the country, where everybody wasn't even that mad. You shouldn't go shoot nobody, let me be clear. But
mhm.
that's how much they didn't like their healthcare. So I work in Washington, D.C., and I'd almost assure you that the big Medicaid companies, the big pharma companies are all going with the Republican.
Yeah. McDonald's,
For sure, Republicans.
All of those corporations, all those corporate PACs, I've given to both my Democratic and my Republican opponent.
Wow. That says a lot about where folks are in this race. I'd always heard for years that there was a group of Democrats in California that would take any kind of money and do the things that you talk about. I think that it also says something about your candidacy. As the old goat in Democratic politics and one of the most senior advisors of anybody in DC, doing this for 36 years, Randy, people like you don't get elected to Congress
Mhm.
because it's hard to raise enough money to be viable. Now, look, in full disclosure, we worked for AOC. We were there in her first race. She's a friend. We've worked for Bernie. We've worked for Ruben Gallego. I've gotten to see what can really make a candidate stand out when they quote unquote ain't supposed to be there because they are regular folks. If you ask me, regular folks being in Congress is the biggest need right now. There's a lot of things happening in Congress, even Republicans who are trying to act like they're with the workers, just like
Mhm.
David Valadao saying, I'd never cut Medicaid, and then voting to actually cut Medicaid and thinking folks will forget that. So that's why I wanted to have Randy on the Substack, not only to tell his story and to talk about what's going on in the district, but to get you to follow and donate and to get and help spread the word. There's the reason how these candidates, when Bernie Sanders first had his press conference, we couldn't get enough people to fill up a phone booth. So we had it out in front of the Senate offices on the lawns, and a few reporters showed up, and we were going to do this. And nobody believed that actually this could happen. This was back in 2015. And then
Mhm.
6 months later, folks were like, this working class populist message is really where everybody is: Democrat, Republican, Independent. Randy, I say that to say that I think you're going to draw a lot of people to this race who aren't just left wing Democrats, who aren't just farm workers. Explain to the folks that don't understand the jungle primary in California how the jungle primary works and how you could tap into the anxiety of a lot of people who may have been voting Republican to actually come on board with you that I don't think they would understand.
Yeah. So here in California, we have a top two primary where essentially everybody, regardless of party affiliation, runs against each other. And then the top two candidates from that primary election will move on to November. And you're
No
right,
matter the party.
no matter the party, regardless of the party. And so we are focused on a universal message of affordability. When I talked about healthcare to folks in this community, I tell them straight up, valley fever, diabetes, cancer, doesn't give a shit who you voted for in the last election. It doesn't ask you what your party ID is. But we know that everybody gets sick, which is why we need healthcare for all and affordable healthcare for all. Your mortgage, your bills, your rent, your groceries don't ask you what your party ID is, and neither will this campaign, because we are focused on fighting for everyone and to bring down affordability for everyone in this district and across the country, right? Because we need fighters in Congress. We're in a moment right now where we're also in a fight for the soul of the Democratic Party, to be quite honest with you, and what we want to stand for as Democrats. If we want to continue to get caught up in the culture wars, or if we want to focus on the actual class war that's going on in this country, where workers are being exploited by billionaires and politicians are bought off by their corporate sponsors. We need to be having a message that says it's us against them. This is not a fight about left versus right. This is a fight of bottom versus top and the people who've been exploiting us for far too long.
I know you've been working in these communities as an organizer. You've been elected to some college boards and different things like that. Let the voters know, what have you heard at the doors and at the swap meets and in the community? Do you hear people who don't like Valadeo? Do you hear people who really don't understand who he is?
Mhm.
Because it would be hard pressed for me to think of the typical Valley middle-aged Mexican man who is me, Chuck Rocha, with a cowboy hat, the belt buckle, drives a big old truck, and like they're just trying to figure out how to make it every day. And as things are going up, sure, they don't like Congress, but they're like, Valadeo, he's probably okay, like whatever, maybe, I don't know. Do you find
Mhm.
that people have been snookered or they just don't know as you're talking to them? Because it seems like those people would be voting against their own well being to vote for Valadeo.
Yeah. To your point, most folks here are just focused on trying to survive every single day, right? Whether that is, working every single day from, sunrise to sunset, to making sure their kids are okay, to make sure they're getting, safely to and from school, to making sure that you can afford the bills at the end of the month. That I saw a recent study that 6 out of 10 people here in the Central Valley have chosen not to go to the hospital, not to go to the doctor because they can afford it. People here in this district will drive 7 hours to Tijuana to go get cheaper prescription drugs and dental work done because they can't afford it here, even with insurance. And so that's what people are dealing with on a day-to-day basis, right? So it's no wonder that they don't have time to pay attention to what's going on politically. But from the folks I have talked to, people are upset. People see that Valadeo has sold us out for his billionaire sponsors. He likes to call himself a moderate, right? He likes to call himself a moderate in politics. But from the conversations I've had with folks and what we're seeing today, there's nothing moderate about ripping away healthcare from tens of thousands of people in your district. There's nothing moderate about taking away food from the mouths of hungry children. There's nothing moderate about trying to take away a woman's rights to choose. And there's nothing moderate about anything Valadeo has done for the past decade. And so people are upset. People are frustrated in seeing him for the corporate sellout that he is and all of the money that he's taken from these corporations, putting them ahead of us.
I've been participating in a lot of focus groups. I did a podcast about this last weekend about how we've taken a lot of Latino voters who voted for Donald Trump and asked them questions in focus groups. And there's a through line. And the through line in the messaging and what we're seeing in these focus groups is there was an anxiety in the community. They were looking for an alternative option. They thought Donald Trump would help bring costs down because he promised to do that on day one. But they didn't expect for him to make things more expensive and to bring ICE into their neighborhoods, arresting not the bad people. They're all about, yes, let's arrest the bad people, just like I know you are, Randy, and I am too. But they weren't expecting them to come into community centers, into courtrooms, into parks and arrest abuelas and other things. And when now I asked them how they felt about their vote, two things rang out to me in these last focus groups we did about 2 weeks ago. And it was that almost all of them said that they regretted their vote for Donald Trump, but they weren't sold on the Democrats yet. Now, this is a national thing. These are folks from all over. And I'm curious of when you're in community, in these farming communities in Visalia and other places in the Central Valley of California, as you run for Congress, what do you hear about Trump? Because I think there's a lot of these Latino working class folks who probably gave him a shot, but I'm curious what you're hearing about their feelings about him and the Republican Party today.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that same buyer's remorse here on the ground. I went to several protests outside of Valadeo's office calling for him to do the right thing. There were folks there with MAGA hats who said, I didn't think he was going to come after my Medicaid. I didn't think he was going to come after my family. But people are seeing the reality on the ground, right? And it's not even just Latino voters. Recently, there was a 73-year-old Sikh Punjabi grandmother, Harjeet Kaur, who was arrested and then transferred to a private immigrant prison here in Bakersfield. And as folks were getting ready to protest the very next day, ICE kidnapped her and placed her somewhere else. And they're refusing to tell us where she is. And it's just disgusting what this administration is doing. It's disgusting that Valadeo is silent as our communities are being ripped apart. These are not hardened criminals. 73-year-old grandmother who has never had any issues, who's always shown up to her interviews. 73-year-old grandmothers deserve retirement, not deportation. And Valadeo's silence and complicity in all this as he continues to champion Trump's immigration policy is disgusting, and it's a complete betrayal of our community. We need comprehensive, sane, and humane immigration reform in this country, and we're not getting it from Republicans. We're not getting it from Valadeo, and we need to make sure we hold them accountable. And so in addition to asking folks to donate, I would actually ask you to also call his office and to demand that they release the information as to where Harjeet Kaur is right now, because we can't afford to wait until 2026 to organize to do right by our communities. To your point, I think it's one of the reasons that people are frustrated with the Democratic Party. Getting thousands of text messages or phone calls and fundraisers. What are Democrats actually doing right now to meet the moment? I can tell you what I did earlier this year when we saw ICE raids in our community. I got to work. I organized a Know Your Rights workshop. I brought together 16 pro bono immigration attorneys from Bakersfield and from Fresno that did hundreds of consultations with folks in the community absolutely for free, in addition to the bigger Know Your Rights workshop. And so we've got to continue to organize on the ground. We've got to continue to prepare for the midterms, but we've got to fight in this moment. We can't sit by idly as Trump tries to rig our democracy and to harm our communities.
I know you've been a champion in your leadership roles for workers, for unions. And when I think about the Central Valley and, that workers' rights and the rights of workers and unions are a big personal thing for me as well. The Farm Workers Union has a long history in this area. There has been agriculture in this area for a long time. People call, for those of you watching from all around the world in the country, they call the Central Valley the breadbasket of America because so much of our produce and so much of our onions and other things come from here. So there has been a long, storied history of farm workers migrating there and putting down roots. I would argue by knowing the data in this district so well because I've worked in it for so long, that many of the voters now are the second and third generation kids of those farm workers who came there to pick the crops. Tell me the relationship with voting, Latinos, this immigrant culture of farming there, and how that's going to affect your election.
Course. It's interesting you raise this because I actually did my whole dissertation on the participation of youth from mixed status families here in the Central Valley. Families like my own, right? Where my parents were undocumented for the vast majority of my life. Thankfully, I was able to co-sponsor them alongside my brother, who's a U.S. Marine. But it's a reality of so many families where, mom and dad can't vote, but, children may be a mix of DACA recipients, U.S. citizens, and, traditional political science would basically tell you, these kids are never going to vote. They're never going to participate because, their parents can't vote. They can't donate to campaigns. They can't model that political behavior, which I found to be bullshit, at least in the folks that I talked to and the youth that I spoke to here on the ground. In fact, many of them are more motivated to vote because they know that their vote doesn't just represent them. It also represents their parents, their family, and many community members who can't vote. Right. And so rather than it being kind of a deterrent, it can be a very motivating factor, especially in this moment as we see families, continue to be torn apart, on social media, in our own communities, and people who are willing to come out. I mean, we saw this in, I'll say, Adelita's special election just last night. Congratulations to our newest member of Congress who overperformed. I believe even her father, I want to say maybe 11 points or so, don't quote me. But I think we're seeing a big backlash to this administration and people who are fired up more than ever to take energy, not just to the streets, but to the polls as well.
And what Randy was speaking to is our dear sister, Adelita Grijalva, who is the daughter of the icon labor environmental champion Raul Grijalva in the 7th District of Arizona, a dear friend of mine, mentor of mine who we lost this year. His daughter ran in a special election last night. She did, in fact, overperform her father by 9 points. She overperformed Kamala Harris by 22. And just showing you the things. This is an ongoing thing that's happening in districts around the country. I am a little Rain Man when it comes to these congressional seats. I've been studying them for a long time. And the one thing that's a through line through these are there's overperformance in these special elections here in Virginia, 4 weeks ago. That means something's happening. You combine that with what I'm talking about with the polling and the focus groups of Latinos that are angry or really pushing back on what their vote was last time. This Democrats just don't mean we got it all figured out either. I call bullshit on all of these consultants who think they got it all figured out. Folks are going to give us another opportunity, but we have to make the Randy Villegas case of what am I going to do? And I'm going to turn over to you here in a minute, Randy, of what I'm going to do to try to advocate for the things that are going to make your life better. It's easy for Randy, again, I'm the old goat here, to say that David Valadeo has done these things to hurt you. He has tried to cut Medicaid. He has made things more expensive. And you can just go down a litany of why he's bad. And that's part of a strategy in every campaign I've ever run. It's just like what we get wrong when we run against Trump. We talk about all the crazy shit that he's done, but we have to give a vision of what we're going to do to make really workers' lives better. Because I think that's the piece where we have gone astray over many years of really leaning into what we're going to do for working families to say, look, all this other stuff, this proliferatory stuff is all important, but what are we going to do to make you have more money in your pocket is really all people care about at their core. Sometimes these folks with big degrees in our community and in our consulting class miss what real folks are thinking about because they think they've got them figured out when they hadn't gotten their hands dirty in a long time. Randy, I know you've gotten your hands dirty. I know you've been rooted in community. What are some of the arguments you're going to say you're going to champion in Congress to make folks' lives better when you're making that pivot on the election trail?
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. This is where I talk about Democrats need to meet the moment, right? I think it's very easy for any Democrat to say, I would have voted no on this big bullshit budget. Yes, I would have voted no also. But let's talk about where we're at in this country, even before these cuts go into effect. 2 out of every 3 bankruptcies in this country are tied to medical debt. Every year, over 66,000 people die because they didn't have health insurance. Not because we couldn't treat them, not because we couldn't save them, but because of a system that denied them care. And so I believe we need to meet this moment. We need to support universal healthcare in this country to ensure that people don't have to wait to go to get better. They don't have to go into hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt in order to get seen and to afford their cheaper prescription drugs. And we need an economy that works for working families. We need to get corruption out of politics. Of course, we need to stop these cuts going, $1.1 trillion in tax cuts going to the top 1%. We should be taxing the wealthy in this country. And we should be focusing on those tax breaks for working class families, like the families we have here in the Central Valley. First $45,000 could be tax free if we tax millionaires and billionaires at the rates that they need to be taxed at, right? We need to be pushing these savings onto our working families. But most of all, we got to get corruption out of politics. And this is something I hear from folks, across the political spectrum. Members of Congress should not be trading stocks, point blank. You should not be going into DC or Sacramento, any of these places to enrich yourself and your buddies, right? It should be about public service. So I'm dedicated to not only banning members of Congress from owning stocks, but also making sure that we get corporate PAC money out of politics. Again, dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres. If these politicians are taking big corporate PAC checks from any of these companies, that is going to influence the way that they vote in Congress, right? I mean, I take a look at, some of the votes my Democratic opponent in this race has taken, right? There was recently a bill to report stronger pesticide requirements in your schools where our children work, or where our children learn and play. She did not support that bill. There was another bill to ban toxic pesticide or chemical carcinogen, DEHP. Did not vote for that bill. As countries are being ravaged by ICE agents, right, and being torn apart, there was a bill proposed by Democrats here in California to unmask those ICE agents and to have them properly identify themselves. She did not support that bill. And so I don't know how you can expect to say you're going to fight for working families in Congress if you can't meet the moment right now. We need to do every single thing possible. We need to make sure that we are fighting using every Roberts Rule of Order, using every procedure we can in Congress to make sure we stop this administration, to fight for working families. We should not be paying the most for prescription drug prices around the world. I want to make sure we're directly negotiating that with pharmaceutical companies, making sure we're supporting universal child care. New Mexico was able to do this. These are not, far off ideas. These are things that are being done across the country right now. It's not a question of how can we afford to do this? It's a question of how can we not afford to do this? And do we have the political will and courage to do these things?
I think you're so right. And for those of you who've just joined, Randy is running against a Republican in California 22, David Valadao, who represents one of the few seats in America that swings both ways. That means it's a little bit Democrat, a little bit Republican. A Democrat could win this. If the redistricting map goes through that's being voted on November, 8,000 more Democrats come into this district. But even if they don't, this is a winnable seat. This is a seat that Joe Biden carried. It was a seat that Hillary Clinton carried. And I think that it's really, really important for y'all to share and go to the website and donate. Give the website again.
As randy.vote/donate.
Also, we're going to go into the speed round, which is the fun round where you don't talk about public policy no more. But as you were talking, before I get to the music and the sports, I was thinking, I know it shows my age, that I was thinking about having this same conversation with Ruben Gallego when he wanted to run for state rep in Arizona before he became the state rep and then became the congressman and now is my client as a U.S. senator. I'm one of his only political consultants currently today. He's my brother. But, he was like you, Randy. He was a regular person. And he would always say to consultants and folks that, why don't we talk to people about what's popular with them, about what they want done, not what we want to see done that they can agree with us on. And, it's easy to say in the progressive community and the labor community and other things that you need to show up where people are. And lots of well-meaning white master's degree consultants who do a lot of this quote unquote working class work don't understand the things that you understand. I think what's impressed me with you, you've surrounded yourself with a team of people, not just your consultants who are wonderful people as well, but your staff, your family, advisors, and everybody is from that community. The moment that I met and saw all these people, and Luis on my team is running lead on a lot of this, is I saw the reflection of what democracy could be like. So when you're thinking about donating to Randy, he's not only taking on the Republican, but the corporate Democratic folks in California running one of their candidates against him as well. And a reminder of y'all, he just has to make the top two to get to November because that's what the jungle primary is. And so that's why I wanted to have him on now. We're getting close to the quarter. The quarter ends at the end of the month. So we're trying to raise as much money for Randy so that he can be viable in this race to go talk to as many voters as he can. And before we get to that and let you go, we're going to have a speed round of what we call all the living La Vida Rocha, which is growing up in the Valley. There's a couple things that draws lots of us together as men, as progressives, as Latinos, and all the above. The first thing is food. And in food, thinking about your family, I'm not just going to ask you what's your favorite dish, but I'm going to ask you what's the favorite dish you like to smell when you'd walk into your mama's or your grandmama's house growing up that made you feel comfort?
Absolutely. My mom's mole. It is the most delicious thing. She always makes it, when I'm in town. It is the best. But I know everyone will say their mom's mole is the best, but truly, my mom's mole is amazing.
Explain to the white people watching this what mole is.
Mole is a dish that can be served, and it's interesting, yes, because different regions and different parts of Mexico and parts of the world will serve it differently. You can have mole verde, mole rojo. The way my mom makes mole is over chicken, and it's really sweet, and I love it that way. But there's spicier moles. There's all these other flavors, and so I think
it's a sauce. It's more of a sauce that you put over it. Me and Ebony were down in Mexico for her birthday like 2 years ago in Puerto Escondido in Oaxaca, and we took a cooking class with some folks down there with a chef, and they showed us how to make Oaxaca mole with all these different spices, and it was a process that took hours and hours. So hat tip to your mom in the mole. Next is, if you get in your truck and you headed to work and the radio comes on, what kind of music are you listening to?
I like to listen to everything. I like to listen to cumbias, but recently I've been listening to Kevin Carl a lot. I really like Kevin Carl, Ivan Cornejo, lots of oldies, if you will. Now, my students tell me that what I grew up listening to is the oldies, right? So, they're saying like Eminem and 50 Cent are the oldies, and I'm feeling even older, but I will listen to anything.
Let me put you on. Go ahead.
I used to say I listen to anything except country, but that's not true. I love Johnny Cash. I love, lots of different country stars, especially old country that talks about, the inequalities that exist in our country.
Oh, you damn hippie. Listen, if you got a walk-up song and you're next up to bat, what's going to be the Randy walk-up song?
Streets of Bakersfield.
Ooh. Last one is, growing up, did you play any sports, and what was your favorite sport?
I did. I grew up playing soccer, football, wrestling. I did cross country for a bit, and I would definitely say soccer. I actually still play once a week, in a Sunday league. Like
at your old age, at 30?
At my old age, at 30, I am. Got an assist last match, but we still lost. But I love playing soccer. It's a beautiful game. You might see my soccer ball here in the background. I root for Team USA, I root for Mexico whenever they're not playing the USA. But absolutely love the game. It's a beautiful game.
Well, Randy, we're looking forward for you being in Washington, D.C., where I could take you out to get some horrible Mexican food here in Washington, and you being a member of Congress. I want to thank you for working with our team and putting your name out there. My wife ran for city council last year, and it just reminded me how exposed you are when you run and you put your name on the ballot. Like, I've run lots of elections for a long time, but it's different when it's your name on the ballot. I was reminded of that when she ran. And so I want to thank you for having the courage to run. I want to thank you for standing up for your values. It'd be easy to give up and just be like every other Democrat, but you're running as a labor Democrat, an environmental Democrat, a progressive Democrat, and a working families Democrat is the way I would explain it to you. And in your parting words, give your final thoughts and then end with that website one more time for folks to give a little bit of a donation if they so choose and to spread that to their friends and family.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chuck, for having me. First of all, thank you for everyone who joined us on the Substack. As I think about the town halls that we've had in this community, as I think about the meet and greets, I spoke to a young child from Armona, California, who talked about, I'm seeing ice raids in my community. What can I do? My parents are struggling. What can I do? You can support this campaign. I'm reminded of another saying in English that people say it takes a village to raise a child, and I certainly would not be here today without my parents, my families, many mentors in my life. But we know that in this race and across this country, it takes more than a village. It takes a valley. And you can be a part of that valley by supporting our campaign, by heading over to Randy .vote/donate. Please help us make a contribution. Our average contribution is, I think, only about $50. Our average online contribution is about 22. So please chip in what you can, whether that's, 20, 50, 500. For those of you who have capacity, please think of a number in your head and then double it, because that's what we need in order to meet the moment in this fight and to win this seat and get the representation we deserve. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Randy, and thanks everybody for being a part of the Rocha Revolution. Follow him on his Twitter. Follow him on all of his social medias. You're going to love what you're going to see out of this campaign, and probably the most culturally competent campaign I've seen one in this cycle. Randy Villegas, he's going to be the next congressman in California 22. And until next week, y'all be good.
Bye, everyone.